Begin today the Gemara on the Avoda Zara, 4 lines up from the bottom of the Yomid, where it says Masnisin Deloy Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. So the Mishnah is discussing those dealings with a guy that you can't do 3 days before his holiday for Avoda Zara, and it brought a machlokes in the Mishnah whether you can do with them, whether you're allowed to borrow money from a guy. The machlokes was regarding something else. The machlokes was whether you can have a guy pay you his loan in this time. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, yes, because he's not going to have any gain from this, so it's not going to cause him to go and thank his Avoda Zara on the day of his holiday. But according to the Chachamim, they say that he may be upset now that he has to pay the loan, but then afterwards he's relieved that he paid up and he's going to thank his Avoda Zara. Those were the two opinions in the Mishnah. The Gemara before explained the machlokes. Now here the Gemara brings a third opinion. These two opinions quoted in the Mishnah is not like this opinion, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. The Tanya, because in our Brayse we learned Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha says, Milve b'shtar. If this is a loan that's in a shtar, it's documented. So then, ein nefrain mehen. This is a loan that cannot be paid up. You cannot collect it from the guy within those days before the holiday. Why? Because in such a case, the guy actually will be happy. He's relieved that he paid it. Because if it's in a document, he's going to be forced to pay this loan. And you can prove that he owes it to you. He's not going to be able to deny it, and therefore he's very happy when he pays it up. However, milval peh, nefraim mehen, but if it's a loan that has not been documented, then you can collect it from the guy in this time. Because in such a case, the guy knows it's not documented and he can easily deny paying this loan, and he wasn't even planning on paying it. The fact that he pays up, he doesn't feel any relief. Adarab, he feels upset that he's paying a loan that he wasn't planning on paying it all. So therefore, there's no reason to be chayshish that he's going to come and thank his Avoda Zara. That's the pshat. That's what the pshat in the Gemara here, according to Rashi. But other Rishonim actually say that the pshat of Matzel Miyodam is, it doesn't matter if he's going to thank his Avoda Zara or not, but because over here the Yid's money is at stake, that he may not pay up, so Chazal will matter to take the money from him to be Matzel, that money that may go get lost. Okay, now, because we brought here this statement of Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, the Gemara brings regarding what the halacha is, and in this case, and other cases where Rabbi Shua ben Karcha also says a certain halacha. So the Gemara says as follows: Yosef, Rav Yosef, Achayre de Rav Abba. Rav Yosef was sitting behind Rav Abba. The Yosef Rav Abba kamei de Rav Huna. And where was Rav Abba sitting? In front of Rav Huna. So Rav Huna was their teacher, and they were sitting in rows in front of Rav Huna. Rav Abba was in the front row, and Rav Yosef was behind him. And the Yosef, Rav Huna was saying, Hilchase Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. That regarding this halacha here, we paskin like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, and not like Rabbi Yehuda or the Chachamim that were brought in the Mishnah. And then he also said regarding a different halacha, that v'hilchasik Rabbi Yehuda, that we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. Now, regarding what was that? Hilchasik Rabbi Yeshua, hodamora. The halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Regarding this halacha here, that there's a difference if it's a loan in a shtar or a loan without a shtar, regarding collecting it in the 3 days before the holiday of Avoda Zara. And like Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya or the Tan, we learned in a Mishnah in Bab Mitzvah. The Mishnah there says, a person gives a piece of wool to someone that will dye it. You should dye it red for him. And instead he went and he dyed it black. Or shachir, he gave it him to dye black, and and he dyed it red. So Rab Meir says, now this dyer, all he has to do is pay back the value of the wool itself, and he keeps the wool and the dye. He dyed it red, whatever the color different than he was told to dye it. Why? So Rashi explains the reason for Rab Meir's opinion is because he basically stole it. He was given it to do a job with one color, and he does it a different color, so he stole it. And there's a shinui here. He changed it from what it is, and halacha by gzeila is you have to return what you steal, but not after there's a shinui. Once there's a shinui, and now you keep that object that you're kainit, you keep it, and you just have to pay the money for it. So over here, he was kainit with the shinui, and therefore all he has to give back is the value of the money of that original wool that he stole from the owner. That's Rav Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says that no, that even if Minat Torah this would be the halacha, but as Rashi here says, that if this is the case, so then it comes out that this person is gaining by the fact that he can keep now this wool with what he dyed it, and it gets its value goes up, and he gains out of this. So therefore, Chachamim gave him a knas and said as follows: he has to return this wool, whatever color he dyed it, he has to return it to the original owner. And now, though, usually he would get paid for the job that he did. But over here, though, he gets paid as follows: if the improvement of the value of this wool that was before just a white piece of wool, and now it's dyed, it has a colored wool. So now if the shvach is more than the expense of what he spent in, what is it, the expense include the money that he paid for the materials that were used to dye it, and the wood that he needs to make a fire, to prepare it, and even the time that he invested, according to Rashi, the time is also included in the yitziyah, the regular pay that would usually be for time. So then, Nais and Loisa yitziyah, he pays him the lower price. He doesn't pay him for the shvach, for the improvement of this tzemer. He pays him for the yitziyah, for the expenses. So the craftsman here that did this job loses out. And it's in the opposite, Vima yitziyah, he said ala shvach. And if the expenses was more than what the improvement of it is, he only gives him the improvement. So basically, the pshat over here is that he's treated like a person which is yared b'rishus chaveri shaloi b'rishus. When you go into your friend's property without permission and you improve his property, you do things without asking him, you have to get paid for it. But you get paid yadi al tachtayna. You get paid either for the expenses that you spent or for the improvement that happened to you, whatever is less. That's how you get paid. And he does not get paid the full price that he made up with the owner that he's going to get paid. That's the knas that Rabbi Yehuda said Chachamim gave this person. Okay, so it's in this, regarding this case that Rav Huna said that we paskin here like Rav Yehuda. So the Gemara says, Ahadrinu Rav Yosef la'ape. When Rav Yosef heard this from Rav Huna, he turned away his face. He turned away his face like in disapproval. Why? So the Gemara explains, the fact that Rav Huna had to teach that the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, that's necessary to teach. Because otherwise I would think to say that Yachid v'Rabim, halacha k'Rabim, we always have the rule that if there's an argument and there's the Yachid, there's an individual, and there's the majority, you always go by the Rabim. So over here, the Rabbim disagree with Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. So it's a chiddush that you pass like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. So Kamash V'lan, halacha k'Yachid. Here the chiddush is that we pass like an individual, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. But Ella halacha k'Rabbi Yehuda lamali. The fact that he's saying that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, why would it be necessary to say this? Pshita, it's obvious that here the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because the machlokes v'achar kach stam, the rule is whenever there's a mishnah that brings a machlokes on whatever subject, and then later the same subject comes up again, and there it's brought as a stam. Over there the halacha is brought without an argument. So halacha is stam. We pass like that stam mishnah that comes after the mishnah where there was a machlokes about this. And therefore the Gemara says, regarding this case, machlokes b'baba kama, there's a machlokes in the mishnah in baba kama. Oh, this mishnah actually that we quoted before is not in baba mitzia, it's in baba kama. So that's where this machlokes is between Rab Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. And stam b'baba mitzia. But then there's another mishnah in baba mitzia where the same halacha comes up, and there it says the halacha like Rabbi Yehuda as a stam mishnah without any argument. Where's the stam mishnah in baba mitzia? The mishnah there says that Tanan kol mishana. If a craftsman changes from the job that he was hired to do, like this case, he was supposed to dye it red and he dyed it black. Yadai ala tachtayna. He has the lower hand, which means exactly like Rabbi Yehuda said, not that he keeps the wool and he pays just the value of the white wool, but that he has to give back the wool. And he gets paid not the price they set in the beginning, but he gets paid the lower price, either the shvach or the yitziyah, whatever is less. So that's the clear mishnah in Baba Mitzia as a stam mishnah. And the other mishnah goes on to say a different halacha. If someone's hired for a job and someone backed out, whoever's the one that backed out, yada ala tachtayna. He also has the lower hand in this, which is not relevant there for this sugya. But the point there is, we see clearly there's a mishnah in Baba Kama where there's a machlekes, and then there's the stam mishnah in Baba Mitzia. So it's obvious that we pass like Rabbi Yehuda here. Why did Rav Huna have to teach his students that the halacha here is like Rabbi Yehuda?
I don't understand the whole thing. He's giving him back, according to Rabbi Yehuda, what does he do? He's giving him back the wool, but the wool's not doing anything good for him because it's a different color now.
Well, it doesn't matter. So, but he has to give it back to him, though. That's He can't keep it. We don't want him to gain, to be able to keep this wool because he went and died.
He's not getting any money for it. So
who's not getting any
what's
money?
What's the person, the dyer, what's he giving to the owner of the wool now?
He's giving back this wool that was dyed.
It's nothing to him anymore.
It's not nothing. It has value. It's not the color that he wanted. He'll sell it. He'll figure out what to do with it. But it has value. Yeah, he's giving him back his wool with the dye that it was dyed. Yeah, it's like inconvenient for him. He'll have to figure out what to do with it, but it has value. But we don't want the one that did the job to keep it, the dyer to keep it, because then he's going to gain. So therefore, there's a knas that he should give it back, and he gets paid a lower price.
All is making it hard for this guy, so this guy should have it hard too.
It's not necessarily making it hard for him. If he doesn't get back, and if he doesn't get it back, it's even harder for him. According to the mayor, he doesn't get it back at all. It's even harder for him because now he has to go and find the wool in the chatchila. So either way, he's losing out. The guy went and stole it from him. He lost out from the moment he stole it from him, right? Okay, let's continue. So the Gemara answers, Rav Hone, the reason why Rav Hone did have to clarify that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, mishum de ein seder le Mishnah. Because Rav Hone will say, there's no order in the Mishnah. Yet you have this rule of if there's first a machlokes and then stam, so you paskin like the stam Mishnah, but Rav Huna says not necessarily is there a seder. Maybe the stam Mishnah really was learned before the machlokes. And the reason for this is, even if in the Mishnayos, the way we have it, there's a seder to the Mishnayos, what comes first and what comes after, but in the way Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the way it was taught, these Mishnayos, not necessarily was it taught in the Bismedrish in the order that we have it. So maybe the machlokes was taught after the stam. So you don't paskin like the Stam Mishnah. The Ikele Meimar, Stam Tone Bereisha, the Stam Mishnah was taught first, and afterwards the Machlokes was taught. So we can't rely on this rule that if there's a Stam Mishnah after the Machlokes, that we paskin like the Stam. So the Gemara says, Barihachi, if that's the case, so Kol Machlokes Achkach Stam. Anytime you have a machlokes and then a stam mishnah, lema ain't say the mishnah. We could always just say that it proves nothing regarding the halacha that we should say machlokes v'achach stam. The halacha is like a stam because always the machlokes could have been taught later. So when do we ever apply this rule machlokes v'achach stam that we pass on like the stam mishnah? And Rav Huna will answer you. It depends. Ki lo yamrinan ain't say there. When will I say that you can't say that maybe they learned out of order? B'chadam mesechta. In the same Masechta, once they began learning a Masechta, they learned that Masechta in order. So if in the same Masechta you see that first there's a Mishnah where there's a Machlokes and then a Stam, you'll paskin like the Stam. But B'trei Masechti, but if you see a Machlokes and a Stam Mishnah that are in two different Masechtas, Amrinan, then it's possible that over here, Baba Kama and Baba Metzia. So it's possible that they learned Baba Metzia before Baba Kama. So they learned the Stam Mishnah first and then they learned the Machlokes. So you can't prove when it's in two different Masechtas. Therefore, it was necessary for Rav Huna to clarify that we paskin like Rav Yehuda. Rav Yosef will answer you the reason why he did not think it was necessary to paskin here. Kol nezikin chada Masechtahi. The entire nezikin is all one Masechta. So there's the Kol nezikin. Some say it refers to the whole nezikin, but the Kol nezikin refers at least to Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Basra, the three Bavas. They are all one Masechta, and therefore, over here, it's in one Masechta, and in one Masechta, definitely it's a machlokes v'achakach stam, and it would not be necessary to paskin on this. Or v'iba yisayme, another reason why Rav Yosef disapproved of this, that Rav Huna paskined here, because mishum diktani la gabi hilchase psikta, because this is being brought here in a Mishnah which is saying halachas that is paskening. It's saying kol mashana yodel tachtayna, chol chayza ba yodel tachtayna. If you look in that Mishnah is not really talking about this theme, Bechlal. It's not talking about this kind of case where a person got a job to do and he changed from his job. It's talking about a worker that was hired, and if one of them backed out, if the employer backed out, or if the employee backed out, that's really the theme of that Mishnah. The fact that it adds in this inyan of Kol HaMishana is because that Mishnah is teaching halachas psukos, and it wants to say that the halacha regarding this is also like Rav Yehuda, Kol HaMashana Yodel HaTachtayna. So from the way it's taught there, in that Mishnah, you clearly see that the halacha is this way. So it wasn't necessary for Rav Huna to paskin this way. That's why Rav Yosef turned his face away in disapproval. So this was one case regarding Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha's opinion that Rav Huna paskin like him. Here the Gemara is going to bring another few examples where the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Tana Rabbana, we learned in a Braisa, Lo Yoim Adam L'Chaveirei. A person should not say to his friend, Hanire Shetame Dimila Erev. So this is on Shabbos. A person says to his friend on Shabbos, can I see you? Will I meet you? We'll be together in the evening to do business. So he's on Shabbos, he's talking to his friend about meeting for business. You're not allowed, because on Shabbos, not only you're not allowed to do any melacha, but also v'daber dover. You're not allowed to speak words that are on business on Shabbos. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha Omer, however, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha says, no, if a person is allowed to say, will we meet each other in the evening? Because he didn't explicitly say that it's for business. He's thinking that's what it's for, but the machshava is allowed. Make it adin. Even though one should not be thinking about business on Shabbos, and Shulchan Aruch actually says if someone thinks about business on Shabbos and it gets him all upset and it gets him completely, takes him away from Shabbos, you're not allowed. Mamish, it's a isser. But over here, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha is saying that because he didn't explicitly say that it's for the sake of business, so then he's allowed to say, we'll meet tonight. And on this, Amar Rabbi Bar Bachana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Hilchase, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. This is another case where we pass like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Another case, Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Braisa, Hanisha l'chacham. Person asks a question by a chacham regarding a halacha, v'time, and this chacham was metame. Lo yisha l'chacham, he should not go and ask another chacham the same shaila and the yitar, and he'll be metayr. L'chacham, he asked a question to a chacham v'asar, and he said it's asar lo yisha l'chacham v'yater. He shouldn't go and ask a different chacham to be mater. As some say, the reason for this is because it's heipach hakovid. It's against the kovid of the first Talmud Chacham that paskin one way, and it shows that you don't trust him. You're asking another Talmud Chacham. Others say it's not because of the kovid of the first Talmud Chacham. It's because once a Chacham paskins al pitayra, the psak din makes this object not to become a cheftza v'yisr, becomes something which is asr, and that can't be changed. The psak of the Torah makes it completely asr. Right, so according to the first reason, if it's mitzad the kovid, b'diavad, if the second Chacham paskin, you can listen to the second Chacham. Clearly, you shouldn't do it because it's heibach hakovid, but b'diavad you could. But according to the second reason that I mentioned, if it's because it becomes mamish like a isser, you can't change that. Even b'diavad, you can't go to a second chacham. Another nafkamina is, what if the first chacham was the one that was mekel? Here it says the example where the first chacham was the one that was machmer. What if the first chacham was mekel? He was mater. Then you go to a second chacham, and you want to go to a second chacham to get a chumrah, to get a isser. So if the point of it here is that it's because the thing already became aser al pitayre, so then that's only if the first chacham was the one that was machmur, or the first chacham was the one that was mekel, and then you hear from the second chacham a chumrah, maybe you could accept what the second chacham says. Okay, now hayishnayim, if there were two chacham sitting together, echad metame ve'echad metayr, and there's an argument between them. One says tame, one says tor, or ve'echad oisa ve'echad mater. One says asa, one says mutter. If one is greater than his friend in his wisdom and minyan, what does minyan refer to? Either minyan refers to his age, that he's older, or it refers to that there are more chachamim, the majority that are there are supporting him. You follow that chacham. If not, so if they're both equal, so then you follow the one that's machmer. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha says, anytime there's an argument, so by a suffix that's menat Torah, you go after the one that's stringent. When it comes to a suffix that's midrabanan, halecha charamekel, you go after the one that's mekel. This is the source of the rule that we always say that by a suffix menat Torah you go l'chumra, and by a suffix midrabanan you always go l'kula. Right? So Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, when he's saying this, so it's not clear if he's saying this even in a case where he's greater than his friend b'chacham or b'minyan, or is he speaking only about a case where they're both equal. Then he's arguing about this. There's some machlokes about this in Mefarshim. Now on this, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Hilchase, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. So here we pass like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha as well. Tana Rabbanan, another case where we pass like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. The kulan shechazru behen. All those that do tshuva. What this is referring to is, as Rashi here brings, people that are gazlan, or an amya oretz. A person that's a gazlan is actually posel le'edus. Or an amma oretz, he's not posel le'edus, but he can't be trusted for taris, for things to be toir. Only a chaver could be trusted, and this amma oretz can't be trusted. Now he wants to do tshuva, and he wants to have again a status of a chaver, or someone that's kosher le'edus, and someone that could be trusted. So, they did tshuva, they cannot be accepted anymore. This is Rab Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says, if they did tshuva privately, that's not enough. It will not be accepted again to consider them again on the status of a chaver, that you can rely on them. But if they do tshuva openly and publicly, then mekabel noisan. Then they can be accepted. We could another version to what Rabbi Yehuda said. Also, the vreim b'matmainis, if the gzeile or whatever else they do that's negative, that's privately done, then mekabel noisan. Then their tshuva would be accepted. But before Hesya, if what they did was they steal and the things that they do is in public, so they went down to such a low level, and then their tshuva will not be accepted. Here Rab Shimon, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha Imrim, Benkach or Benkach, either way, whether it was before Hesya, B'tzina, whatever the case is, you could mekablim, we always accept the tshuva. Shenema, the pasuk says, Shuvu banim shevavim. The return children that are shivavim, that are going off and are rebelling against Hashem. So it says here in the pasuk the term shevavim. Shevavim means even someone that rebels against Hashem, and even if it's publicly shuvu, they can always do tshuva. Rashi says shevavim is mashma amazing, and they can always do tshuva, and it's always will be accepted. And on this, Amar Rav Yitzchak Ish Kfar Akai, Amar Rav Yechanan Hilchase Ka'isei Hazog. We pass like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, or like both Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Shua ben Karcha regarding this, that you can always accept the tshuva. This is Rashi's pshat in the Gemara, but there is another pshat that Rishonim say, because it's something that's difficult to understand over here. The first opinion of Meir says, you never accept a tshuva. So the Rishonim ask, how could Rav Meir say this? You never accept a tshuva from a Gazlan or Amoritz, why not? So therefore they say the pshat in what it said is, Chazru behemei mekabla means someone that was a Gazlan or an Amoritz, and he did tshuva, but then he returned to his old ways, and now he wants to come and do tshuva a second time. It's then, only then, that Rav Meir says that we see already that he has a tendency to go back, so we can't trust him. We don't know. We're going to start trusting him for Taris because he did Shuvah, but maybe the next day he's going to return. So therefore we can't trust him regarding the Taris. That's what it's talking about. Rabbi Shmuel says, Shloisha lefneim, 3 days before the holiday of Avoda Zara, and Shloisha lachreim, and also 3 days after, Asr. It's also to do all the dealings that was mentioned in the first Mishnah with the guy. The Chachamim argue and say, Lifnei Yidei Noser, before the days before the holiday it's Asr, but La'achar Yidei after Mutter. Afterwards it will be Mutter. Amar Rav Tachlifa B'Rav Dimi Amar Shmuel Yoim Aleph, a Sunday, which is a day of a holiday for Avoda Zara, l'divrei Rabbi Shmuel, so according to Rabbi Shmuel's opinion, la'olam aser. It's always going to be aser to do business with a guy, because if it's Sunday is a day of Avoda Zara, so then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is aser, the 3 days after, and then the 3 days before, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos will be aser. So you can never do business with this guy. Chachamim v'ayimrim lefnei yidei aser, la'acher yidei muter, chulu. The Gemara Chachamim Haina Tanakama. What Chachamim is saying here is the same as the opinion of the Tanakama, which is the first Mishnah in the Masechta that said that Lefnei Yidei, that 3 days before you can't do business with them, but after you could. So what's the Chachamim over here adding that's different?
Well, that's only if you consider Sunday. Every Sunday they're a holiday. But if it's a holiday that only comes once a year, so you can't do business with them for the whole week.
Yeah, okay. Here we're talking about every Sunday, though.
Every Sunday,
yeah. But this is only Bisman HaGemara, when the Sunday was a real holiday for Avodah Zara Mamish. We discussed it already before, yeah. Okay, so the Gemara asks the question, Chachamim here seem to be saying the same as the Tanakama in the previous Mishnah. So the Gemara gives a few pshatim what the difference is. So the Gemara, Hein Beloyi Dayan Ikebenaya. A discussion that the Gemara had before, when it says 3 days, what does 3 days mean? Does 3 days meaning including the holiday? Or does it mean Beloyi Dayan, 3 days before, not including the holiday? That's the difference between them. Tanakama Sava, the Tanakama's opinion is, as the Gemara proved before from the Lashon of the first Mishnah, Hein Beloyi Dayan, that the 3 days is 3 days besides the holiday. But Rabbana Basroi Savri, but the Chachamim here in this Mishnah, they hold Hein Ve'i Dayan, that it's the 3 days that includes the day of the holiday. Ibai Seima, another pshat, Nasa v'Nasan Ikebenayu, Bidi Yeved. If you did do business with the guy in this time, could you have a na from that money? Before the Gemara brought it some machlokes between Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish. So the Gemara says, Tanakama Sover, the Tanakama says, Nasa v'Nasan, Mutter, that if you do the business with the guy, so then it will be allowed. Basroi Sovri, but the Chachamim here in this Mishnah hold, Nasa v'Nasan, that if he does business with them, Aser. Then it'll be Aser. Because over here, that's the Lashon of the Chachamim here in this Mishnah. Lefnei Yidei Aser, and so the term of Aser that he's saying here is to add this point, that even with the Yeved, it'll be Aser as well. By saying another pshat, the Shmuel Ekibinai. The point that Shmuel said is the difference between the Tanakam and the Chachamim here. The Amar Shmuel said, "Begoila ein aser ella yaim edam," that in Golos, where the Avoda Zara, they're not so dedicated to their Avoda Zara like it was in Eretz Yisrael, the ones that served Avoda Zara. So over here, it's only on the day of the holiday of Avoda Zara that it's also to do these business dealings with them. Tanakama Islay the Shmuel. The Tanakama holds of what Shmuel said, that 3 days is only in Eretz Yisrael, but not in Golos. And Rabbana Basroi less Lu the Shmuel. The Rabbana Basroi disagree with Shmuel, and they say that even in Golos it is also their machmer, and even here it's also for 3 days. And Rashi said the Gemara is saying that the Chachamim here are more machmer than Tanakama, because usually when there's a machlekes, the second opinion that's brought is more machmer than the first opinion. Or the final pshat the Gemara says is the Nacham Hamadai Ikebenaya. The difference between the Tanakama and the Chachamim is the opinion of Nacham Hamadai. The Tanya in the Brayso we learned Nacham Hamadai Yomer Eina Aser Ela Yom Echad Lefnei Idein. This whole issur of these dealings with a guy is only 1 day before his holiday. Tanakama less like the Nacham Hamadai. So Tanakama does not hold it. The Tanakama clearly said 3 days. But Rabbana Basroi, however, the Rabbana Basroi in this mission over here, what does it say? They said Lefnei Idein Aser. Didn't say how many days. It just said Aser. So it's the Nacham Hamadai. The Chachamim here hold like Nacham Hamadai that it's only 1 day. Okay, so now here the Gemara will discuss what Nacham Hamadai said and bring many other things that Nacham Hamadai said. Gufe Nacham Hamadai Oime Nacham Hamadai said Eina Aser Ela Yom Echad Lefnei Idein. Only 1 day before the holiday is Aser. And Amru Loi, Chachamim said to Nacham Hamadai, Nishtaka Hadova V'loi Nemar, that what you said should be submerged or it should be forgotten. We don't paskin like this. In fact, the Gemara, why don't we paskin like what Nacham Hamadai said? V'ha'ikar Rabbana Basroi, the kind of say. We just explained that this is the opinion of the Chachamim here in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Man Chachamim, Nacham Hamadai. There was no other Chachamim that agreed to him. It says in the Mishnah Chachamim, but it really is only Nacham Hamadai that held of this opinion, and therefore we don't paskin like him. So here the Gemara brings other things that Nacham Hamadai said, where the same thing was said to him, that that we should forget what he said and we don't paskin like him. So Tanya Yidach, we learned in another brayso Nacham Hamadai Yomer. Nacham Hamadai said, Meichrin lahem, you could sell to a guy sus zachar, according to the girsa that we have here in our Gemara is sus zachar vezaken, or you take out the vav. The Bach says take out the vav. Zachar zaken b'l milchama. If it's a male horse that's old, and in a war, you can sell it to a guy. Now, what's the context of this point that Nacham Hamadai is saying? We'll learn later here in the Masechta that it's a gzeira not to sell a guy large animals, large livestock. Why? Because a yid has a mitzvah on Shabbos that shvisas behemtai, that he's not allowed to work, his animals are not allowed to do work on Shabbos. If you're going to sell to a guy these animals, you may come to lease or to rent to a guy this animal, and then the guy will work with it on Shabbos. You're not allowed to sell large animals to a guy. So here Nacham Hamadai is saying, but if it's an old male horse and a mulchame, this is allowed. And the reason is because then it's something which is not commonly done to sell an old male horse for a mulchame, so therefore this is something that Gzeira Chachamim does not apply. And on this Amru Lai, it was said to Nacham Hamadai, Nishtaka Dovar V'loi Nemar. Forget about this. It's like it wasn't said. We don't paskin this way. In fact, the Gemara, why not? V'ha'ike ben Beseida, the Koik was say, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseida holds this way. The Tanan, as we learned, ben Beseida, mater besus, ben Beseida says you're allowed to sell a guy a horse. And the reason why he was mater this is, as Rashi here brings, because since the whole Gzeira is that the guy might then rent from you and work with it on Shabbos, but by a horse is not usually made to carry packages on it. A horse is made usually for a person to ride on it. If a person rides in it on Shabbos, so then you don't have the issue of using the behemoth because the minatayr it's mutter, because a person carries himself. So when you ride on the horse is not carrying your weight alone. You carry yourself. So therefore, by a horse, you're allowed to sell to a guy. So therefore, you see that seemingly it's not only Nacham Hamadai's opinion. Ben Beseida says similar. So the Gemara answers no. Ben Beseida le maflig ben scharim le nekevis. Ben Beseida holds any horse. Doesn't matter if it's a zachar or nekev. You could always sell a horse to a guy for the reason that I mentioned. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Nacham Hamadai the kamaflig ben scharim le nekevis, he makes a distinction between whether the horse is a male or a female. So that means that really Nacham Hamadai holds like Rabbanah's opinion that say that you can't sell a guy, even a horse. And the Gemara will explain later in the Masechta that according to the Rabbanah, you can't sell a guy a horse not only because of Shabbos, but you can't sell a guy a horse because they use these horses in war to trample upon people. But Rabbanan, so therefore, according to Nachum Hamadeh, which is he's going like the Chachamim, we say Nishtaka Dava V'Lo Nemar, that we pass like the Chachamim and not like this detail that Nachum Hamadeh added, that if it's a male horse that's old in a war that you could sell. That's what they said to him, Nishtaka Dava. Another halacha that they said that we don't pass like Nachum Hamadeh. Tanya, we learned in the Braise, or it's in the Mishnah. Tanya. Tanya Yidach, no, actually, this is a Braise. Tanya Yidach, we learned in another Braise. Nachum Hamadeh said, Hasheves, dill. So this is regarding a halacha of Maisa. So midrabanan, you give Maisa even from vegetables. So when it comes to dill, so he said, Misaser, you give Maisa from its zera when you allow it to grow, and then there's these little seeds that you have the dill from this. So you have to give Maisa from that. Or v'yerek, even if you use the leaves from it, which is what we use from the dill. Or v'zirin, there's also additional branches that grow that become a little hard, and that's used as well. There's 3 different parts in the stages of what the dill grows, and from all of it, you have to give Maisa. Amru lo, and on this they said to him, Nishtaka Dava V'Lo Nemar. This should be forgotten. It wasn't said. We don't pass in this way. Because by the dill, the main thing that's used from it is only the zera, the seeds that grow from it, and not the rest. So that's the only thing you have to give Meiser from. Like the Gemara, but why was this said? Rabbi Eliezer said, just like Nachum Hamadeh, the Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer said, Hasheves misaseres. You give Meiser from Sheves and all these 3 parts. Zera, the seeds, the Yerak, the green, the leaf from it, and Vizir, and also other branches that grow on it. And so the Gemara, Hasan b'dignunisa. What Rabbi Eliezer said is when it's growing in a garden. Then all these stages of the growth of the dill is used, and you have to give Meiser. Nachum Hamadeh held, even when it's not in a garden, even B'chlal, wherever it grows in a field, you always have to give Meiser from all 3 stages, and it's on that the Gemara says we don't paskin like him, because then they only use the zera, only the seeds are used. Now the Gemara says about all of this, we see here Nachum Hamadeh said all these halachas, and whenever he said halacha, they told him, forget about what you said, we don't paskin like you. So the Gemara says, Amalei Ravacha bar Menyumela Abaye, Gavre Rabba Osa, Me Asrin, and Komilsa the Omar, a great person came to our place, and whatever he says, Omrile, they tell him, Nishtaka Dava V'Lo Nemar, forget about what you said, and we don't paskin like you. So Omar, so Abaye said, Ikke Chodad of Dina Kavasei. There is one halacha that Nachum Hamadeh said that we do paskin like him. The Tanya we learned in Abraisa, Nachum Hamadeh Yomer. Nachum Hamadeh said, Shoyel Odom Tzrochov b'Shemei Tefillah. In Shemei Esrei, in the bracha of Shemei Tefillah, before Kata Shemei Tefillah's kopeh, you could stop and say any personal bakasha that you have. And on this, but this is the halacha in Shulchan Aruch, and we paskin like Nachum Hamadeh. So Omar, so he answered, he said, or Omar Malay, Ba'minei dahi. No, take out this halacha that you just said, that we paskin like him. That's not Nachum Hamadeh's own statement. The Talye ba'ashli rabrevi. There's a thick rope. There's other chachamim that said this already. That's one taich. Ashli rabrevi means a thick rope, or it means there's a large tree that we have to rely on that said this. It's not only Nachum Hamadeh. Where do we see this? Because at Tanya, there's the following machlekes regarding davening. Rabbi Eliezer says, Shayol Adam Tzrochov, when a person comes to daven, first he should ask from the Eibush his own personal needs, and then you daven Shmei Nesre, the nusach of the brachas of Shmei Nesre. But first your own personal needs. Shanam, because the pasuk says, Tefillah la'ani, a poor person comes to daven kiyatif. Now kiyatif means that Rashi says that he has his own personal needs and worries, and he expresses that first and davens for that first, and then afterwards then he davens Shmei Nesre. That's the tefillah b'chlal, and ein sicha el tefillah. Shanema, like it says by Yitzchak, Yitzchak lesuach basadi, he went out to daven, he davened mincha. So that's the seder in davening. First you say you daven for your own personal things, then you daven Shmei Nesre. Rabbi Shua says the opposite. Yispalel v'achakach yishol tzrocha. First daven Shmei Nesre, and then when you're done davening Shmei Nesre, then you can ask for your own personal things. Shanema, because there's a different pasuk. It says, Eshpoich lefonav sichi. I pour out my heart with sichi, with siach is the dav Shmei Nesre, you daven b'chlal. And then only afterwards, tzarasi lefonav agid. Then the person says his own tzaris and he davens for himself. Okay, now the Gemara explains here, this machlekes, before it brings the source of what Nachum Hamadeh said, that it said in Shemei Tefillah, it first explains these 2 opinions. Like the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer nami haksiv eshpech lefonav sichi. What does he do with the other pasuk that it says that first you daven sichi and only then you ask for your own personal needs? So the Gemara says, Hachikam, according to him, you have to touch that pasuk, Eshbech lefonov sichi, bizman shetzarasi lefonov. I daven to Hashem when I already said my tzaras to the Eibishter before. So you have to sort of be matchik this pasuk because he has another source, tefillah kiyativ, that you first you say your own personal needs. The Gemara similarly explains according to Rabbi Shua. But Rabbi Shua nami yaksiv tefillah kiyativ. So this pasuk implies that you first say your own personal needs. So how does he say that you first daven Shmoneh Esrei? So again, the Gemara says, Hachikam, according to him, you're going to have to say, Eimesai, Tefillah, La'ani. This pasuk is saying, when do you daven Shmoneh Esrei for the poor person? Bizman shalifnei avai yishbech sichai. When you already daven Shmoneh Esrei before. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Mechdi, let's see, what's really the basis of their machlekes? Kroi loy kemar daiki v'loy kemar daiki. These two psukim here, they're not exact, not according to this opinion and not according to the. You have two opposite psukim here, and you're going to have to be matchik according to each opinion, one of the psukim over here. So what are they really arguing about? But my kamiflagi, what is the basis of their machlekes? Says the Gemara kedidarish Rab Simloi. The basis of their argument is what Rab Simloi darshaned. The Darish Rab Simloi said, La'olam yisader adam shvachish hamokim v'achach yispal. A person should first praise Hashem and then he davens. Minolam, from where do we learn this? Moshe Rabbeinu. The Chsiv by Moshe Rabbeinu, it says when he was davening to enter into Eretz Yisrael, he said, Hashem Elokim atachi lo yisal laharis asavdecha v'gaymer, and he speaks about this yotcha chazaka, gotlecha yotcha chazaka. He praises Hashem. When the Chsiv Basrei, only afterwards it says, Ebrono ve'eres ha'aretz ha'toive. Then he comes and davens to Hashem. So we see that he first praises and then davens. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Rabbi Shua savar yafina mi Moshe. Rabbi Shua says you learn from Moshe, so therefore you daven Shmoneh Esrei first, because if you're going to daven Shmoneh Esrei first, you have the first three brachas that are the shvach of the Eibishter, and then you daven Shmoneh Esrei, and then afterwards you could ask your own personal needs. Rabbi Eliezer savar, Rabbi Eliezer says, lo yafina mi Moshe. We don't learn from Moshe, because Shani Moshe, the Rav Guvrei. Moshe Rabbeinu was such a great person, he's on a different level, and therefore for him, he should come and praise the Eibishter first, and then he can daven. But for another person, that he is on a level of Moshe, that he can praise Hashem properly, and therefore to praise first before he davens, that we don't apply that to a regular person. Therefore, by a regular person, he has to first daven for his own personal needs, and then he can daven Shmoneh Esrei. The Rishayim, I think the Rashba actually explains that the point here is, according to Rabbi Eliezer, if you ask for your own personal needs before you daven Shmoneh Esrei, so then you're expressing your humility, your bittul, your shiftless, that you realize how needy you are, you daven for your own personal things, and then you daven Shmoneh Esrei, that's more appropriate. Mashenkin, according to Rabbi Shua, no, we learn from Moshe that you praise Hashem, and then you could daven. So as you see here, the machlekes is regarding an individual, what happens with his own personal needs. But regarding the Seder of Shmoneh Esrei, everybody actually agrees to what we learn from Moshe, that in the Seder of Shmoneh Esrei, the first three brachas is the shvach of the Eibishter, and then comes the other brachas where you ask your own personal needs. In Shmoneh Esrei, like regarding the tzibur, that's the Seder of the way Chazal designed Shmoneh Esrei. Regarding a yachid, is the machlekes over here. Okay, let's just finish the inyan. So the Gemara here brings, here we see where the Chachamim said like what Nocham Amodai said. The Chachamim say, we don't pass like either of these opinions. A person will ask for his needs when? Not before Shmoneh Esrei, not after, but in the bracha of Shemei Tefillah. And some gears you have like the opinion of Nocham Hamadai. Okay. Okay, that's a handshake to the singing. Okay, I guess we'll continue that. Okay.